The rain falls in heavy sheets across the muddy field as Private James Harrington clutches his M1A1 bazooka, his knuckles white against the olive-green tube. Anzio, Italy. February 1944. The German Panzer IV tank advances through the mist, its metal tracks churning the earth like a hungry beast. "I can't get a clean shot," James whispers, his voice barely audible over the distant artillery fire. His hands shake, not from the bitter cold that has seeped into his bones after 3 sleepless nights, but from the memory of what happened in Sicily. The faces of his fallen squad members still haunt him. Lieutenant Thomas Miller crawls beside him, mud caking his once pristine uniform. "This is our chance to redeem ourselves, Jimmy," he says, the scar across his left cheek tightening as he speaks. "The colonel says this new model won't misfire like the others. It's supposed to be idiot-proof." The air fills with the metallic smell of rain on steel, the acrid tang of gunpowder, and the sickly sweet odor of burning fuel from a disabled Sherman tank 50 yards back. Every sense heightened in the moment before death or glory. James positions the bazooka, following the procedure exactly as Dr. Edwin Carlson had instructed during their rush training. The brilliant but arrogant scientist had promised this version would work flawlessly, unlike the catastrophic failures that had already cost so many American lives. As James prepares to fire, a mysterious figure appears in his peripheral vision, someone who shouldn't be there, someone whose presence makes no sense on this blood-soaked Italian beachhead. In that moment of distraction, his finger tightens on the trigger, and a terrible premonition grips him. This weapon, this miracle of American ingenuity, might once again become the deadliest threat to its own operators. 3 months earlier, James had been a physics student at Cornell University, his promising academic career interrupted by the draft. His analytical mind and steady hands had made him an ideal candidate for the Army's new anti-tank weapon program. The bazooka, with its revolutionary shape-charge warhead, was supposed to give infantry a fighting chance against German armor. But the weapon's troubled development had been shrouded in secrecy and rushed by desperate necessity. "You've got natural talent, Harrington," Dr. Edwin Carlson had told him during training at Aberdeen Proving Ground. The scientist's immaculate lab coat seemed out of place among the mud-splattered uniforms. "Most of these farm boys can barely read the manual." Carlson was brilliant but deeply flawed, a weapons designer whose innovations had saved American lives but whose arrogance had cost others. His refusal to acknowledge design flaws had led to the weapon's nickname among troops, the backblast bastard. In the flickering light of their tent at night, James often found himself lost in memories of home. His wife Marie's letters described their small apartment in Brooklyn, now feeling impossibly empty. Their last night together replayed in his mind, her tears soaking his uniform as he promised he would return. "My father fought at Belleau Wood," he had told her. "He came back. So will I." But that was before Sicily, before he'd watched Private Rodriguez pick up a bazooka with fatal confidence, only to have the weapon's backblast malfunction, sending superheated gases into the firing team instead of propelling the rocket forward. 5 men lost in an instant. Lieutenant Miller had been there too, earning the scar that now marked his face while trying to pull men from the flames. Their shared trauma had forged an unbreakable bond, even as it drove a wedge between them and the others who hadn't witnessed the horror. "Science doesn't care about your feelings, soldier," Carlson had said dismissively when James had raised concerns about the weapon's safety protocol. "The mathematics are perfect. The failure was human error." Now, in their rain-soaked foxhole, James and Miller shared a silent understanding. They had been selected for a special mission, to prove the bazooka's effectiveness in actual combat conditions while a military photographer documented their success. Colonel Westmoreland had made it clear, failure was not an option. "This is more than just another skirmish," the colonel had explained. "Congress is watching. Funding depends on results." But James harbored a devastating secret. During inspection, he'd noticed the same manufacturing flaw that had caused the Sicily disaster. When he'd reported it, his concerns had been dismissed as combat anxiety. The official report had already been written, user error, not design failure. Miller suspected something was wrong but trusted James implicitly. "Whatever happens out there tomorrow, I've got your back," he'd promised, passing James a tattered photo of his fiancée back in Oklahoma. "Just make sure I get to give this ring to Ellie in person." As dawn approached, James made an impossible decision. Follow orders and risk his men's lives, or sabotage the mission and face court-martial. The weight of command pressed down on him like the tanks they were meant to destroy. Hey folks, I'd love to know where you're watching this video from. Drop your location in the comments below. It's amazing to see how history connects us all around the world. The attack was scheduled for 0600 hours. Rain continued to fall as James, Miller, and 3 other men, Corporal Davis, Private Watkins, and Private First Class Romano, moved into position. Each man carried pieces of the weapon system, the launcher tube, rockets, firing mechanism, and the new experimental armor-piercing rounds. "You think too much, college boy," Romano muttered as they crawled through mud toward their ambush position. The Italian-American from Boston had never hidden his resentment of James's quick promotion. "These fancy weapons won't matter if Jerry spots us first." Davis, barely 19 and from rural Georgia, looked at James with unwavering trust. "The lieutenant says you know this weapon better than anyone, Sarge." "That true?" James felt the weight of the young man's faith like another piece of equipment strapped to his back. "I know enough to keep us alive," he answered, unable to meet Davis's eyes. Their position overlooked a crucial supply road the Germans had been using to reinforce their positions. Intelligence reported that a panzer unit would be passing through at dawn, the perfect opportunity to demonstrate the bazooka's capabilities for the waiting camera crew positioned on higher ground behind them. As they assembled the weapon, James deliberately left a critical safety mechanism slightly misaligned, not enough to guarantee failure, but enough to give him reason to abort if necessary. His conscience warred with his duty, each turn of the wrench feeling like betrayal. Miller noticed. His voice dropped to a whisper only James could hear. "What are you doing?" "Saving lives," James replied, equally quiet. "Or ending them," Miller countered. "Including yours. That's treason in wartime." Their eyes locked in silent confrontation until a distant rumble announced approaching tanks. The moment of choice had arrived. Suddenly, Captain Vance appeared, crawling toward their position. His presence was unexpected. He was supposed to be coordinating from headquarters, not in the field. In his hand was a telegram. "Harrington," he said, extending the yellow paper. "This came through headquarters." James took it with trembling fingers. The message was brutally concise. "Marie Harrington, critical conditions, stop Brooklyn hospital bombing raid, stop Dr. Carlson requesting immediate consultation regarding weapon modifications, stop the implications hit James like physical blows. His wife, injured in a German bombing of New York Harbor. And Carlson, requesting him specifically for weapon modifications, meaning the scientist had finally acknowledged the design flaws. "Is this real?" James asked, voice hollow. "As real as those tanks coming up the road," Vance replied, nodding toward the approaching German column. "But command says the mission proceeds. We need this footage. The decision is yours. Complete the mission and we'll get you on a transport home tonight. Fail and the paperwork gets lost." The brutal calculation was clear. Demonstrate the weapon successfully and return to his dying wife, or abort and possibly never see her again. Miller read the telegram over James's shoulder, his expression darkening. "That's not a choice. That's blackmail." "That's war," Vance replied coldly. The tanks were now visible through the morning mist, 5 panzers advancing with infantry support. The camera crew was setting up, ready to document American ingenuity in action. Romano noticed the tension. "What's happening? We firing or not?" In that moment, James made his decision. He quietly reset the safety mechanism properly, ensuring the weapon would function as designed. Then he handed the telegram to Miller. "If I don't make it, make sure Marie knows I tried to come home," he said. Miller nodded grimly. "I promise." As James sighted the lead tank, Davis and Watkins loading the rocket behind him, a terrible revelation struck. The telegram had been delivered too quickly after the supposed bombing. Communication lines weren't that efficient. This was a test of his loyalty, or worse, a manipulation. The first tank was now in perfect firing position. The entire squad watched James, waiting for his command. Fire, he ordered, making his choice. The rocket launched with a deafening roar, striking the lead panzer dead center. A perfect hit that sent flames erupting from the tank's turret. But as the crew reloaded for a second shot, James noticed something wrong with the ammunition Romano had handed him. The rocket had been deliberately sabotaged, the fins misaligned. "Who gave you this?" James demanded. Romano's eyes were cold. Captain Vance said to make sure this one got used. Said it was special for the cameras. James realized too late, he wasn't the only one with doubts about the weapon. But someone else had decided to prove those doubts dramatically, on camera, regardless of the cost in American lives. Hey everyone! If you're enjoying this historical drama, please hit that subscribe button and like this video. Your support helps us reach our goal of 1,000 subscribers. We've got more incredible stories from history coming your way. Get down! James shouted, knocking the sabotaged rocket from Romano's hands just as the second German tank swiveled its turret toward their position. The distinctive crack of an 88mm cannon split the air, and dirt erupted just meters from their foxhole. The percussion knocked Davis backward, blood streaming from his ears. Miller grabbed James by the collar. "What the hell was that about?" "The rocket was tampered with," James explained breathlessly. "Someone wants this weapon to fail spectacularly, on camera." Understanding dawned on Miller's face. The perfect excuse to cancel the program. But who? There was no time to speculate. The remaining German tanks were deploying infantry, soldiers in Feldgrau spreading out to flank their position. The American squad was trapped between advancing enemy forces and what appeared to be sabotage from within their own ranks. Romano, Davis, maintain position and create suppressing fire, Miller ordered. Watkins, check each rocket for tampering. Harrington, you're with me. James followed Miller to a depression behind their position where the camera crew had set up. The lead photographer, a civilian contractor named Phillips, was frantically adjusting his equipment. "Keep filming no matter what happens," Miller commanded him. "That's a direct order." Phillips nodded nervously, his camera lens capturing the chaos unfolding below. As they returned to the front, a mortar round landed near Romano's position. The blast sent him tumbling down the hillside, his helmet rolling away separately. When James reached him, Romano's eyes were wild with pain and fear. "I didn't know," he gasped, revealing a deep shrapnel wound in his side. Vance said it was a special round for demonstration. "I swear I didn't know it was sabotaged." James pressed a field dressing against the wound. "Who gave it to Vance?" Some suit, civilian, spoke with a German accent. Said he represented the competing weapons program. The pieces suddenly connected in James's mind. Werner Müller, Carlson's academic rival before the war, had emigrated to America in '38 and was developing a competing anti-tank system. If the bazooka failed spectacularly enough, Müller's design would get the funding. The 3rd Panzer was now less than 100 yards away, its machine guns strafing their position. Davis had managed to ready another rocket, this one checked thoroughly by Watkins. "Give me the launcher," James told them, taking position. The weight of the bazooka felt different now, heavier with the knowledge that American lives were being sacrificed in a corporate weapons competition. As he sighted the approaching tank, a sniper's bullet struck the ground inches from his face. "I can't get a clear shot," James called out. Miller appeared beside him, blood streaming from a fresh wound on his arm. "Together then," he said grimly. "Just like we practiced." They positioned themselves back to back, Miller supporting the rear of the launcher while James aimed. It was a dangerous formation, exposing both men, but it provided the stability needed for an accurate shot. "On 3, James said. 1, 2. The world slowed to a crawl. James saw the German tank commander's face through his sight. A man no older than himself, probably with his own family waiting at home. He saw Davis praying quietly, saw Watkins covering Romano's wound, saw the camera lens capturing it all. Most clearly, he saw Marie's face, imagining her receiving news of his death. 3. The rocket launched perfectly, striking the tank's vulnerable point where the turret joined the chassis. The explosion was massive, sending the turret cartwheeling through the air. But the backblast from the launcher ignited something in Miller's pack, a flare he'd been carrying, and suddenly his uniform was ablaze. James dropped the launcher and tackled his friend, rolling him in the mud to extinguish the flames. Miller's screams tore through the battlefield cacophony. "Stay with me!" James shouted, beating out the flames with his bare hands, his own skin blistering. The remaining German tanks began retreating, having lost their lead vehicles and facing unexpected resistance. A moment of eerie quiet fell over the battlefield, punctuated only by Miller's labored breathing and the distant camera's mechanical whir. Then James saw him, a civilian in a mud-spattered suit observing from the tree line. Even at this distance, he recognized Dr. Muller's distinctive silver hair and round spectacles. Their eyes met across the battlefield, and Muller simply nodded once before disappearing into the forest. As American reinforcements finally arrived, James cradled Miller's burned body. The lieutenant's breathing was shallow, his once handsome face now a mask of charred flesh. "Did we get them?" Miller whispered. "We got them," James confirmed, tears mixing with the dirt on his face. "The weapon worked perfectly." Miller's blistered hand found the pocket containing his fiancée's photo, now singed at the edges. "Tell Ellie I was brave." In that moment, as medics rushed toward them and the camera continued to document everything, James understood that the true battle wasn't against the Germans at all. It was against the machinery of war itself, a system that valued weapons over the men who carried them. Washington, D.C., November 1944. The congressional hearing room buzzed with tension as James, now promoted to staff sergeant and wearing a Purple Heart, took his seat at the witness table. 8 months had passed since Anzio, and the war had taken unexpected turns. The bazooka had been modified based on James's recommendations, saving countless American lives, but the cost had been high. "Sergeant Harrington," began Senator Robert Taft, his voice carrying across the marble chamber, "your testimony today contradicts the official Army report on the Anzio incident. You're claiming that American civilian contractors deliberately sabotaged their own country's weapons during wartime." James's dress uniform felt tight around his throat. In the gallery behind him sat Marie, finally recovered from injuries sustained in the Brooklyn Navy Yard bombing. Beside her sat Ellie Thompson, Lieutenant Miller's fiancée, her engagement ring now hanging on a chain around her neck. "That is correct, Senator," James replied, his voice steady. "The evidence we've submitted includes documentation of communications between Dr. Werner Muller's weapons development firm and certain elements within the procurement division. The evidence, photographs, intercepts, and the testimony of a dying Romano, had been meticulously collected in the months following Anzio. James had discovered that Muller's company had made millions selling inferior weapons through shell corporations, deliberately undermining Carlson's more effective designs. "And where is Dr. Muller now?" asked Congressman Martin, leaning forward. "He disappeared after the Anzio footage became public." The infamous footage, captured by Phillips' camera, had shown American soldiers triumphing despite sabotage, not because of superior equipment. It had become a propaganda sensation, though not in the way originally intended. Carlson entered the chamber then, walking with a pronounced limp, a souvenir from his voluntary deployment to the field after learning of the sabotage. The once arrogant scientist had been humbled by witnessing firsthand the consequences of his design flaws. "Carlson," Senator Truman addressed him, "your latest modifications to the M1A1 have reportedly increased effectiveness against German armor by 60% while reducing operational failures by 80%. How do you respond to criticism that these improvements could have been implemented before Anzio?" Carlson's eyes met James's across the room. The improvements resulted directly from field observations made by Sergeant Harrington. Had I listened to his concerns earlier, many good men might still be alive. The admission stunned the room into silence. Later, in the corridor outside the hearing room, Carlson approached James and Marie. "I've been offered a position at Los Alamos," Carlson said quietly. "Something big. They say it could end the war." James nodded. "Congratulations. I want you there, Harrington. Your perspective is invaluable." The word hung between them, an acknowledgement that James's understanding of the human cost of weapons development was something Carlson had lacked. "I've seen enough destruction," James replied. "After my discharge, I'm going back to Cornell. To teach." Marie squeezed his hand supportively. Carlson seemed about to argue but noticed the haunted look that still lingered in James's eyes. "I understand. But remember, the weapons will be built with or without men like us guiding their development." As Carlson walked away, Ellie approached, carrying a small wooden box. "Tom wanted you to have this," she said, offering it to James. Inside was Lieutenant Miller's Silver Star, posthumously awarded, along with a note, "Make sure it matters." That evening, James and Marie visited the Walter Reed Hospital where Davis and Watkins were still recovering. Davis had lost his hearing in one ear, and Watkins walked with a permanent limp. "Did you tell them everything?" Davis asked, his voice louder than necessary due to his partial deafness. "Everything that matters," James confirmed. Watkins gestured to a newspaper headline about new anti-tank weapons being deployed to the Pacific Theater. "They're calling it the Miller modification." Tom would have hated the attention. James smiled sadly, but he would have loved knowing it's saving lives. As they left the hospital, a military car waited curbside. Inside sat Colonel Westmoreland, now General Westmoreland, who had overseen the Anzio operation. "The hearing went well," he said as James and Marie entered the vehicle. "But there's something you should know. We've received intelligence that Muller has surfaced in Argentina." James felt a cold determination settle in his chest. "Why tell me?" "Because we're sending a team to bring him back for trial. The team needs someone who can identify him positively." Marie gripped James's arm. "You promised. No more war." James stared out at the Washington Monument, illuminated against the night sky. "This isn't war, Marie. It's justice." The general handed him a folder. Inside were photographs of Muller with several high-ranking Nazi officials who had escaped Europe. "There's more at stake than just the Bazooka sabotage," Westmoreland explained. "Muller has knowledge of German weapon developments that could destabilize the post-war world." That night, as Marie slept, James stood by their apartment window, turning Miller's Silver Star over in his hands. On their wall hung a framed photograph, the original squad at training, before Anzio, everyone smiling, unaware of what awaited them. "Make sure it matters," Miller's note had said. In the morning, James called Westmoreland. "I'll go to Argentina on one condition. When this is over, all the files on the Bazooka sabotage become public. Every name, every company, every dollar." "That will create significant political problems," the general cautioned. "That's the point," James replied. 3 weeks later, as his ship approached Buenos Aires harbor, James wrote a letter to Dr. Carlson at Los Alamos. "Whatever you're building there, remember, weapons don't just kill the enemy. They change the ones who use them. Make sure that change is one we can live with." Buenos Aires, December 1944. As dawn broke over the harbor, James watched Dr. Muller being led in handcuffs onto an American military transport plane. The man's arrogance had finally crumbled when confronted with evidence of his collaboration with Nazi officials, betraying not just his adopted country but humanity itself. Turning away from the airfield, James touched the telegram in his breast pocket, Marie announcing she was pregnant. Life continuing despite everything. In that moment he understood what Miller had died to protect. Not just his fellow soldiers or even his country, but the possibility of a future worth building. The investigation James had demanded exposed a network of corruption reaching into the highest levels of military procurement. Though some of the revelations were buried in the name of wartime unity, enough truth emerged to change how America would develop weapons for generations to come. James's insistence that ethics be considered alongside effectiveness became known as the Harrington Doctrine in military engineering circles. When his son was born in 1945, James named him Thomas, after the lieutenant who had given everything to ensure a weapon designed to protect soldiers actually did so. And when Thomas asked about his namesake years later, James told him not about heroism in battle, but about moral courage, the harder kind of bravery. The bazooka, refined through the Miller modification, went on to help turn the tide in the Pacific theater. But its greater legacy was invisible, the lives saved by weapons never built, dangers averted by scientists who remembered that innovation without conscience is merely sophisticated destruction. In war's darkest moments, it is not the weapons that determine our humanity, but the choices we make about how, and whether, to use them. The true battle is always internal, fought in the space between duty and conscience, between what we can do and what we should do. Wow, what an incredible story of moral courage during one of history's darkest chapters. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the hidden battles behind World War II weapons development, hit that subscribe button for more untold stories from history. Leave a comment sharing what aspects of military history you'd like us to explore next. Remember, understanding our past helps us make better choices for our future. Until next time, this is Historical Battlegrounds, bringing you the human stories behind the headlines of history.